edges in it. This way we can flip it over and then just mark around the edges here, right where the edge of the seat is going to fall on the seat pan. Now I just go through, I'll mark the whole thing, then I'm going to stitch around my marks. Actually, I'm going to stitch about 3/8 of an inch in, and then that'll lock over these stitches so when we cut it, the stitches don't unravel. One thing we're going to go over is there's a couple different ways you could do the bottoms of the seat. So this is obviously just a basic quick seat pan, fiberglass seat pan. When you sew the bottom piece on, you can have it just a smooth material like this. And the reasons we'll do sometimes, and which we're going to do on this one, is because this seat pan is molded really close with tight tolerances to the fender. If we were to fold it over like you'll see us doing a lot of seats and rivet that on here, that extra bump's going to push you forward a little bit. It's not a lot, but by the time you put your felt on there and your all that material and the rivets, it's enough that it's going to push it away. So on this one here, we're just going to sew our bottom piece on. We're going to leave it smooth, and then we're going to put our felt on top of it. You know, sometimes you use felt, sometimes you don't. Like on a show bike, it works good. If the bike's going to get wet a lot, having the material underneath it is definitely not advised. And you'll see some seats where they put the felt underneath it, then they have a rolled edge and they put the rivets on top of those. Those look really nice. They have exposed rivets, but when you have a seat pan that's really molded to the bike, having those exposed rivets, you have a high chance that they're going to mar the paint. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the smooth material come through, and then we're going to put our felt liner on top of that. You know, it's not the way I prefer it because, you know, it doesn't really have a nice edge to it and a nice finished look to it, which I'll show you, but it does work for this instance, and that's what we're going to do. I just cut the bottom, and now we're going to sew this onto the top cover and test fit it. So it looks like we're going to be good to go here. One thing I forgot to mention before is when we're doing our edge seams here, you see how I rolled this around, I put a top stitch on there. So this is going to come underneath there, and you'll see it's just going to lay flat there. Like I said, I don't want to fold it and then rivet it because I don't have too much material there. It's not a lot, but I just don't want it to push against the bike. One thing when you're patterning you really got to pay attention to is the way your material stretches. So if you look at this material here that we're using on the top, it's a really tough material. It doesn't want to stretch. So when you're going around corners, it's really tough. This material doesn't, you can see here, it just doesn't want to walk over. And even when you heat this material up, it doesn't like to really change. Then you could take a different, like a vinyl like I use for the bottom, and it's a strong vinyl, but it stretches so much easier. And when you heat it up, it could really stretch. And the reason you want to know that is because when you mark, like you saw me mark the edge here where I'm going to roll that material under, if I was doing like say a nice leather, it's going to stretch really easy over there. So if I did this seam here, this seam might end up way farther down there. So if you wanted to pull the seat tighter, which you always do, because when you're doing a seat, you can pull it around, there's no wrinkles, but if it sits for a while, it's actually going to move around and you might see a wrinkle. So we like to heat it or steam it and then pull it just a little farther. So you get your wrinkles out, then you pull it a little more, and then that will actually keep those wrinkles out for good. Now, if you're using a material like this where it doesn't stretch, and we had actually went and done it a little too far in, when we go to pull it, we won't be able to pull it around because it just doesn't want to stretch. Because remember, when we did this material, the stretch is front to back, not side to side. So now if I try to stretch this around, it's not going. So you want to make sure that your seam is exactly where you want it, because you don't want to have a seat with a stitch on the side of it, which looks horrible. So I know this is going to work, so we're going to go down and put it on. I just went through and put a piece of real thin plastic on the tip and the tail of this seat, just because this cover, this material does not stretch well at all. So the odds of me doing it like I normally do it, where you put the seat cover on here and then roll this on inside out, it's not going to happen. So I'm going to trim a little bit around the edges here of the Savage on the bottom. I don't like to really trim the bottom just because it goes underneath the seat and I don't want to take a chance of ripping it, ripping a seam, but we're going to do it anyway. Now there's also a question always of, do you glue it or not glue it? This one here I'm gluing because I know that if I heat this material up and stretch it, it doesn't stretch really well. So there could be a possibility of this not conforming into this cavity like I want it. So I'm going to put a little glue basically just where I know it's going to need it. Now I'm also going to let this dry. Normally you'd want to put it on and stick it as soon as it tacks up. But I'm going to let it dry just because I know I'm going to have to slide the back over and slide the front over and then adjust it. And then we'll use the heat to reactivate the glue. And now that we got this on, I want to kind of pull around the sides and make sure everything's going to line up. Which it looks like it's going to. Now we're going to start heating it and pulling it. You can see here with this radical shape, you're going to get a few wrinkles down here, and we don't want those to stick right now at all. You can see by gluing this area, it really got us where we want to be without having any wrinkles here. So now we get, this isn't glued, so we get to heat this up and pull this. So what I'm going to do is, because this is a fiberglass pan, and it's a custom, it's not a factory, so there's no holes in it. I am going to take just some Tech screws, I'm going to zap it in there. I'm just using 1/2 inch, and obviously this has a lot of foams, we're not worried about it going through and puncturing everything. And we will take these off to actually go through and rivet them on. Yeah, it's tough with this material because, like I said, when you're heated up, it really doesn't help a lot. Whereas most vinyls, when you heat them up, they move a lot. And I got the wrinkles out, but I'm going to go just a little bit tighter. And we're going to zap it in there. Another thing I always try to do, when you're doing the bottom of the seat, you always try to keep your gaps and your staples or screws, whatever you're putting in there, or rivets, even along the bottom. Even though it's going to be covered, it just looks a little better. One thing I forgot to mention, which I kind of just automatically did, is the first thing you want to do when you're putting these on is make sure your center points are marked up with your center points. And I kind of just naturally did that because I glued this lightly here just to keep it in place. So now I just want to make sure that my center point, which it is, my center right there, is lined up. I can't really put a screw in the center here because our tab's going to be there. Put 2 in here. I know these videos are dragging on because I'm trying to show you a lot of stuff, but one thing, because this material doesn't stretch well, like I've said many times, as you pull it, you can see here, there's like sideways creases. I'm hoping you can see that. So whenever you're removing wrinkles, if it goes left to right, you're going to pull that way. If it goes this way and you start pulling this way, it's going to make those wrinkles tighter. So I'm going to warm it up because any heat helps. When you're heating stuff up, you're always keeping your hand there. If it's too hot for your hand, it's too hot for the vinyl. And looking at what you're doing. Now I'm just going to kind of massage this up. And that pulled that, all those wrinkles right out. Alright, so you can see here, this is a real basic look. We just went through and I actually did glue it too, so the material's glued down and riveted. Now we're going to put our liner on the bottom of it, and that's going to cover all this so that it protects the rear fender from any of the rivet heads on there, and from obviously the fiberglass. Right, so we have the liner on the bottom, just kind of cleans it up a little bit and protects it from the rivets hitting the bike. Got to put the tab on it, clean it up, and put it on the bike and see how it looks. And also, remember to go to YouTube, follow us, or subscribe to our channel, comment, let us know what you think. If you don't subscribe and you just watch our videos, it's kind of like stealing the milk without paying the cow, how do they say? I don't know what it is, but anyway, subscribe to our channel. Thanks.